Hey there, wonderful listeners. Welcome back to the Summer Camp Secret. If you're just tuning in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a follow, and drop a comment below. It really helps us keep these stories alive. Today, we're unearthing a story that proves some legacies aren't found in a will, but hidden within the very fabric of family. Imagine a lifetime of unspoken truths, buried deeper than any grave. A secret so profound, it could shatter everything you thought you knew about the people you love most. This is the story of a twisted inheritance, not of wealth, but of silence, and the staggering price it demands. The beginning of the journey and discovery. There's a comfort in the familiar, isn't there? A soft, warm blanket woven from cherished memories and well worn anecdotes. For me, that blanket was Grandma Elara's stories of Camp Clearwater, a vibrant tapestry of childhood bliss that, I realize now, was missing a crucial thread. A thread that, once pulled, threatened to unravel everything I thought I knew. Curled on the plush window seat, the afternoon sun, warm and buttery, painted stripes across her favorite novel. Beside her, Grandma Elara meticulously arranged dried flowers in a vase. Each movement was gentle, deliberate, almost meditative, a living picture of serene contentment. It was in these quiet, golden hours that she would often drift back to her summers, her voice a soothing balm. Ah, Camp Clearwater. Those were the days, Aurora Belle, pure magic under the stars. The smell of pine, the crackle of the campfire. I'd smile, closing my book, my mind already drifting to the imagined scenes. She adored these stories. Grandma Alara's childhood tales were usually vibrant, full of laughter. A comforting tapestry woven with threads of nostalgia. They were my escape, my personal fairy tale. You always make it sound like a fairy tale, Grandma. All those midnight feasts and daring canoe races. And the talent shows? Oh, your Uncle Victor. He tried to do a magic trick with a rabbit. Ended up pulling out a startled squirrel instead. We howled, Aurora. Just absolutely howled with laughter. Her eyes would sparkle with genuine delight at the memory of Uncle Victor's antics. He was always the clown, the wild card in her stories, bringing chaos and joy in equal measure. But as she spoke, a strange, almost imperceptible pattern began to emerge. A silence. Not a loud silence, but a subtle, recurring absence, like a note missing from a familiar melody. It was the way certain names, certain faces, simply never appeared in her vibrant recollections. One afternoon, I picked up an old, faded photograph. It showed a group of children, blurry with age, gathered around a camp sign. My finger traced a face at the very edge of the frame. A young girl, barely visible, with shy eyes and two long, dark braids. A face that stirred something in my memory, a ghost from one of Grandma's half-told tales. Who's this, Grandma? The girl with the braids? You never really mention her. The air in the room seemed to thicken. Grandma Alara's hands, which moments ago moved with such calm precision, paused midair. The dried petals she was holding fell silently to the table. Her gaze, usually so open and loving, clouded over for a fleeting moment. A tiny, almost imperceptible tremor ran through her, a ripple disturbing the otherwise placid surface. Oh, just a girl, from one of the other cabins. Camp was always bustling, you know. So many faces, so many coming and going. Her voice, usually so rich with detail, was suddenly distant, almost brittle. A flicker of something unreadable crossed her features. Was it pain? Fear? A quick, almost defensive glance at me. Then, a forced cheerfulness returned, like a shutter quickly closing over a window, abruptly cutting off the light. Are you going to help me choose which vase these go in, dear? Or are you going to get lost in those old dusty memories all afternoon? I nodded slowly, a quiet acquiescence. But the image of the girl, the unmentioned girl with the braids, remained stubbornly fixed in my mind. That moment was a tiny, unsettling crack in the perfect facade of Grandma Elara's joyful past. It wasn't just a forgotten name, it was a deliberate omission. An unspoken question that began to echo in the quiet afternoon air, growing louder with each passing moment, compelling me to seek answers where I knew they wouldn't be easily found. The feeling wasn't malicious, but a deep, cold certainty that beneath the warmth of her stories lay something fragile, something she desperately guarded, opening the chest and initial revelations. That night, sleep felt like a distant shore. The question about the braided girl, Martha, spun endlessly in my mind. It was a tiny stone thrown into the still pond of my grandmother's past, and the ripples were starting to spread, disturbing everything. The feeling was almost magnetic, pulling me back to my laptop, a digital detective on a quiet, personal quest. The dim glow of the screen felt like a portal, a secret window into the past. The image of Martha haunted me. Her shy smile, almost lost in the old photograph, seemed to plead for recognition, for her story to be heard. A nagging curiosity, a sense of something unfinished, compelled me to search. I typed Camp Clearwater history and Alara Sterling childhood into the search bar, my fingers dancing across the keys, a frantic energy building inside. Hours melted away in the silent glow of the screen, each click a step deeper into the past. Finally, buried deep within a digitized archive of local historical society records, a digital ghost from the past, I found it. An old camp yearbook from decades past, its virtual pages brittle with time. My heart thumped a little faster, a mixture of excitement and dread. Scrolling through the blurry black and white pages, past rows of unfamiliar faces and forgotten smiles, I saw her. Clearer this time, her image sharper, more defined. The girl with the distinctive long, dark braids. Her name, printed neatly beneath her shy photo, was Martha Everett. Clicking on the name, a surge of quiet triumph mixing with burgeoning apprehension. It was her. The missing piece. Then the twist. A chilling discovery. Tucked away in a forgotten corner of an old online news archive, a tiny, almost insignificant newspaper clipping dated from that very summer. The headline was stark, understated, yet resonated with a cold dread that spread through my veins. Camper Martha Everett departs Clearwater early after unspecified incident. I felt a sudden, cold knot tighten in my stomach, a physical clench of fear. Unspecified incident. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning, chilling me to the bone. It was vague, frustratingly so, citing only personal reasons. But the instinct, sharp and undeniable, screamed at me. This wasn't a minor camp spat. There was so much more to this story, a dark secret deliberately hidden. The article mentioned Martha's family quietly moved away shortly after, vanishing without a trace, almost as if they were erased. A cold suspicion began to solidify, turning my blood to ice. Uncle Victor, with his rambunctious energy, his almost too loud laughter in Grandma's stories. Grandma Elara's sudden, defensive evasiveness when I'd mentioned Martha. The way she had deliberately steered away from any mention of this particular friend. It all clicked into place, a dark, unsettling puzzle piece sliding into its predetermined slot, revealing a disturbing image. The innocent camp stories, once so pure, now felt tainted, poisoned by this grim revelation. A chilling undercurrent of something deeply, irrevocably wrong, something that felt like a betrayal, began to churn within me. This wasn't just history. This was a mystery unfolding, and I knew, with a growing sense of urgency, that I was only at the beginning of uncovering the truth. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, already searching for more, the next clue beckoning, reading the letter and the buried truths. The next morning, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, usually a comforting embrace, now carried a faint, bitter edge of tension in the kitchen. It was a stark contrast to the previous day's cozy glow. Grandma Elara was humming softly, a fragile tune, as she flipped pancakes, but even that gentle sound felt strained, anticipating the inevitable. I walked in, my laptop clutched tightly in my hands, its presence a silent accuser. My heart was a drum against my ribs, each beat echoing the weight of the knowledge I carried. Grandma. Can we talk about Camp Clearwater again? Really talk? Her humming stopped abruptly. The spatula clattered to the tiled floor, a jarring sound in the sudden quiet. She turned slowly, her eyes, usually so warm, widening slightly as she saw the laptop. A flicker of fear, raw and unguarded, crossed her face before she could mask it. Oh, more camp stories, dear? Come have some pancakes. They're still warm. Her voice was forced, a desperate attempt to cling to the comfortable veneer of normalcy. But the warmth was gone, replaced by a thin, brittle quality. I knew this was it. This was the moment I had to push to uncover the truth, no matter how painful. I found an old yearbook online, Grandma, from your summer there. I found the girl with the braids, Martha Everett. The name hung in the air, a bell tolling a forgotten memory. Grandma Alara's face drained of all color, turning ashen. Her hand flew to her mouth, trembling violently, a silent scream of recognition. Martha? Oh, Martha. Her voice was a mere whisper, a ghost of a sound, filled with an ancient, unbearable sorrow. This wasn't just a forgotten friend, this was a wound festering for decades. The newspaper said she left early. After an incident. What happened, Grandma? What really happened? Grandma Elara turned away, walking slowly to the window, her back to me. The light seemed to fade around her, leaving her silhouetted, small, and vulnerable against the bright morning. Her shoulders slumped, carrying an invisible burden. It was a very long time ago, Aurora. Some things are better left undisturbed. Buried, her voice was barely a breath, filled with a plea to let the past lie. But I couldn't, not anymore. The discovery of Martha's forgotten story had changed everything. But it involves our family, doesn't it? Uncle Victor. Was he involved in what happened to Martha? The name, Victor, hung heavy in the air. This was the moment of truth. The twist in this family drama. Grandma Elara slowly turned back, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, a silent torrent of pain. A furious battle raged in her gaze, a desperate, lifelong need to protect her son, warring with an overwhelming, crushing burden of guilt that had finally become too heavy to bear. It was agonizing to watch. Victor was a difficult boy, mischievous. He didn't understand the harm he was doing. It started as a joke, a cruel trick, but it went too far, so terribly, terribly far. Her words were torn from her, ragged with emotion. She wasn't just admitting something, she was reliving it right there in front of me. The casual dismissal of mischievous couldn't hide the deep agony in her voice. A prank. Grandma, the article hinted at something serious. Was he bullying her? Or was it something much, much worse than that? The question hung, sharp and accusing. Grandma Elara crumpled into a kitchen chair, tears streaming down her aged face, her hands twisting in her lap. The dam had finally broken, years of suppressed pain gushing forth. He took advantage of her kindness, her trust. She was so vulnerable, Aurora, so sweet. And he was our boy, my son. I saw it, I saw what he did. The confession hung in the air, a devastating revelation. I saw it, I saw what he did. Those words pierced me. My strong, unwavering grandmother, a silent witness to such a cruel act. The realization hit me like a physical blow, cold and sharp. This wasn't just a family secret, it was a profound injustice. And you covered it up to protect him, to protect the family name, our reputation. My voice, though calm, held an edge of accusation I couldn't hide. It was a statement, not a question. A bitter truth acknowledged. What else was I supposed to do? My parents, your great grandparents, they would have been ruined. The shame would have destroyed us. Our family, it would have been shattered into a million pieces. I truly thought I was doing what was right. For everyone. I begged Martha's parents to keep it quiet. They were good, decent people. They just wanted to escape the pain. She looked up, her eyes pleading, full of an ancient anguish that stretched back decades. Her desperation was palpable. I could almost see the young Elara, trapped, believing this was the only way to save her family. It was a heartbreaking glimpse into the impossible choices people make out of fear and misguided loyalty. The silence in the kitchen was now thick, heavy with the weight of generations of unspoken pain, a legacy of a lie. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the raw emotion that had just been unleashed, leaving us both exposed and vulnerable. This wasn't just Grandma's secret anymore. It was ours, now inextricably linked to the dark heart of our own family tree. Confronting the past and searching for clues, the discovery of Clara's name in the diary had ripped open a gaping wound in our perception of the family. The air was still thick with the lingering shock of the revelation. How could Aunt Clara, the sweet, seemingly harmless relative who had always hovered around Grandma, be the viper in the nest? The thought was a jarring dissonance, a betrayal of everything we believed. We needed proof, tangible evidence to confront a truth so ugly it threatened to unravel the very foundations of our family. This wasn't just about curiosity. It was about a desperate need for justice, a burning anger on Grandma's behalf. Our next clue, an old hand-painted ceramic bird, felt like a deliberate taunt now. It depicted a quaint, old bank building downtown, its ornate facade hinting at a bygone era, almost mocking us with its serene image, hiding a cruel secret. Scrawled on the back was a precise address in what we now recognized as Grandma's frail but unmistakable hand. It seemed innocent enough, a simple direction, but after the agonizing hints from the diary, we knew better than to trust appearances. This was no ordinary treasure hunt. It was an investigation, a hunt for a perpetrator, and our stomachs churned with a mixture of dread and morbid curiosity. We understood intuitively that the stakes had just been raised exponentially, moving from whispered accusations to concrete locations, demanding immediate, decisive action. The innocence of the quest was gone, replaced by the grim reality of a cold case. The journey to the bank felt less like a casual drive and more like a grim pilgrimage into the past, each block bringing a new wave of apprehension, a sense of nearing a dark, painful truth, a truth etched in cold, hard financial records. The imposing, almost intimidating facade of the old bank seemed to sneer, guarding its secrets with an unyielding stoicism. Getting information from the old institution was a nightmare. It was like pulling teeth from a concrete wall. Every step met with bureaucratic resistance, evasive answers, and endless paperwork. Days bled into weeks of endless phone calls, navigating labyrinthine bureaucratic hurdles, and filling out mountains of tedious legal papers, each one a test of our dwindling patience and a slow, agonizing burn of frustration. The weight of the delay gnawed at us, a fear that we might never uncover the full extent of Clara's betrayal. Max, usually so patient, became relentlessly focused, his composure stretched thin, but his determination only growing with each closed door and evasive answer. His quiet fury, a palpable force, became the engine of our progress, pushing us forward relentlessly, his frustration a silent roar, fueling his relentless pursuit of truth. Lily, her usual bubbly energy replaced by an almost frantic edge, her emotions raw and exposed, frayed by the endless delays, finally broke. This is ridiculous. She burst out one afternoon after another dead-end phone call, slamming the receiver down with a frustrated cry that bordered on a desperate wail. They're making it impossible. Maybe Grandma just made a mistake. Maybe there's nothing here, and we're just chasing ghosts, embarrassing ourselves, wasting our time while we should be grieving properly. Her words, though born of frustration, hit a nerve. Was it possible we were wrong? Was this all a painful misunderstanding? A seed of doubt, cold and sharp, began to sprout. But the gut feeling, the raw emotion from Grandma's diary, was too strong to ignore. We pushed on, fueled by a grim resolve. The tension in the air was palpable, a growing unease that this discovery, this truth, might not bring closure, but instead, an even deeper chasm within our family. The fight was far from over. It was only just beginning, and we braced ourselves, unearthing Aunt Clara's past and motives. The forum post, that tiny spark in the digital darkness, became our guiding light. The woman who remembered Martha also recalled fleeting, unsettling details about Aunt Clara's early life. A period of financial hardship, whispers of bad company, and a brief, hushed scandal before Grandma Elara took her in. This was the mini hook, suggesting a vulnerability, a motive beyond simple malice. It was a bitter pill to swallow, the idea that our beloved Aunt Clara might have been desperate, not just cruel. Driven by a mix of dread and a desperate need for understanding, we dove deeper. We found old town records, dusty newspaper archives from her hometown. What we uncovered was a grim mosaic of her youth. Clara, a bright but naive girl, had fallen prey to a con artist, a manipulative lover who exploited her trust, leaving her deeply in debt and utterly alone. Grandma Elara, ever the protector, had indeed brought her into her home, nursed her back to health, and paid off her substantial debts, believing she was saving her sister. It painted a picture of Clara not just as a villain, but as a victim first, then a perpetrator. The twist came with the bank records. After weeks of relentless pushing, a sympathetic junior clerk, touched by our persistent story of a grandmother's secret, finally gave us a discreet nudge. He pointed us to obscure transaction logs from the very year of Martha's incident. There, clear as day, were a series of large, unexplained withdrawals from Grandma Elara's personal account, coinciding perfectly with deposits into a newly opened account under Clara's name. This wasn't just about emotional harm, it was about blatant financial exploitation. The kindness betrayed wasn't just a metaphor, it was a cold, hard theft. The K-letter 1ECBCH tin escalated as the full scope of Clara's calculated deception became horrifyingly clear. She hadn't just hurt Martha. She had used Grandma's profound generosity and love as a shield, orchestrating a scheme that both financially devastated Grandma and emotionally traumatized Martha, all while hiding behind an innocent facade. This revelation, colder than any legal document, ignited a searing anger within me, a profound sense of betrayal not just for Grandma, but for the fundamental trust within our family. How could someone so close, someone Grandma literally saved, be capable of such calculated cruelty? The moral complexity of it gnawed at me. Pity for Clara's past struggles warred with a burning indignation for her actions. This wasn't just a narrative of villainy. It was a tragic dance of desperation, exploitation, and devastating silence. The air in the room felt heavy, pregnant with the bitter taste of truth, leading us to the inevitable, explosive confrontation. Direct confrontation with the oppressor. The decision to confront Aunt Clara was excruciating. My heart pounded with a mix of dread and furious resolve. We chose a neutral location, a quiet cafe, hoping the public setting might temper the inevitable explosion. But there was no preparing for the storm. As Clara, with her usual sweet, almost fragile smile, took a sip of her tea, I laid the diary on the table. Its worn leather cover, an innocent object, became a weapon. Aunt Clara, we need to talk about Grandma Elara's diary, and about Martha Everett. Her smile vanished. Her hand, holding the teacup, froze, then began to tremble. Her eyes darted between the diary and our faces, a desperate, cornered animal look. For a fleeting moment, I saw genuine fear, a rare vulnerability. Then the facade cracked, replaced by a defensive, almost aggressive denial. What are you talking about? What diary? Martha, that's ancient history. Why are you bringing up old nonsense? Grandma would never want this. Her voice, usually soft, rose in a frantic, almost shrill pitch. The twist came when Max calmly slid the bank statements across the table. The neatly printed columns, the dates, the amounts, undeniable proof. The color drained from her face. Her eyes scanned the documents, searching for an escape but finding none. Her carefully constructed world of innocence crumbled before us. No, this is a lie. You're trying to ruin me. Grandma loved me. She never told you this. The confession, when it finally came, was a devastating torrent. Her voice, ragged with a mix of rage, fear, and a desperate, long buried shame, finally broke. She confessed to orchestrating the prank on Martha, a calculated act of sabotage to discredit Martha, who was a witness to Clara manipulating Grandma's finances, the abuse of trust. The deliberate, cruel act that caused Martha's early departure and her family's subsequent move. It was a story of a desperate, cornered individual, yes, but one whose desperation had led to monstrous acts. The K letter 1 ECBCH tin reached its peak as her carefully constructed life shattered into 1,000 pieces, revealing the bitter core beneath. A glimmer of remorse, fleeting and quickly swallowed by self-preservation, flashed in her eyes as she spoke of her own past, her voice cracking with the pain of her own long-held secrets. But it was quickly overshadowed by the chilling awareness of her intentional cruelty. The air in the cafe, once quiet, now felt charged with the echoes of a broken past, a devastating truth finally brought to light. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was an exorcism of a decades-old lie, leaving us all breathless, reeling from the raw, exposed pain, revealing the truth to the family and its aftermath. The raw confession from Aunt Clara, a devastating secret finally unearthed, left us reeling. But the heaviest burden still lay ahead, bringing this shattered truth to the rest of the family. There was no easy way to tell them that the sweet, unassuming Aunt Clara they knew was a perpetrator, and that Grandma Elara had carried such a profound, painful secret. We decided on a quiet family gathering, hoping to soften the blow. The atmosphere was initially light, filled with chatter and the familiar warmth of kinship, a stark contrast to the bombshell we were about to drop. Then I spoke. My voice, though firm, trembled slightly as I began to recount the story, starting with the mysterious will, the attic discovery, and finally, the diary entries. As I described the cryptic words about kindness betrayed and a viper in the nest, the room began to fall silent. Faces, initially curious, twisted into expressions of confusion, then disbelief. Lily's eyes welled up, reliving the initial pain of discovery. Max stood silently beside me, his presence a rock of support, his gaze unwavering, reinforcing the gravity of my words. The twist came when I revealed Clara's name, coupled with the undeniable evidence of the bank transfers and her own confession. The room erupted. Devastating shock gave way to volatile chaos. Uncle Victor, his face contorted in a mix of fury and disbelief, screamed at the injustice, unable to reconcile the image of his mischievous mother with the protector of such a dark secret. Cousins argued, some vehemently denying, others grappling with the horrifying implications. Bitter divisions instantly formed, tearing at the fabric of our seemingly united family. Grandma's siblings, those still alive, were consumed by grief and anger, not just at Clara, but at the decades of silence, the truth hidden from them. It was a brutal, raw spectacle of betrayal and confusion, the deepest wounds exposed for all to see. The aftermath was a long-term fallout. Family gatherings became awkward, strained silences punctuated by simmering resentment. Some chose sides, others retreated entirely, unable to cope with the shattered facade. It was heartbreaking to witness the fracturing of what I had always considered an unbreakable bond. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was also a glimmer of morbid relief. The truth, however painful, was finally out. The silence had been broken, allowing the festering wound to begin, however slowly, to heal. The K-letter 1ECBCH tin wasn't in a single dramatic climax, but in the slow, agonizing unraveling of a family myth, replaced by a raw, uncomfortable, yet ultimately liberating reality. This wasn't the end of our struggle. It was merely the bitter beginning of true healing, a journey that would redefine what family truly meant. Ethan's reckoning and new paths. The family's reaction, a maelstrom of anger, grief, and confusion, left me utterly exhausted, emotionally drained. The shattering of our family myth was far more volatile than I had anticipated. Yet, amidst the chaos, a more personal reckoning loomed: Uncle Victor. He was at the epicenter of this storm, not just as Grandma Elara's son, but as the perpetrator who had started it all. His denial had been fierce, almost violent, a desperate attempt to cling to the memory of his mischievous youth. But the weight of Grandma's confession, combined with the irrefutable evidence, slowly, agonizingly, began to chip away at his defenses. I approached him days later, when the initial shock had somewhat subsided, finding him alone in his study, staring blankly at an old photo of himself as a young boy with Martha, smiling innocently. His shoulders were slumped, the swagger he always carried replaced by a profound weariness. There was no anger left in him, only a crushing defeat. This was my mini-hook, the once unapproachable, jovial Uncle Victor, now stripped bare by truth. Uncle Victor, Grandma told me everything. About Martha. He flinched, his head bowing slightly. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. What followed was a raw, painful confession, not of anger, but of deeply buried shame and regret. He spoke of his own insecurities as a boy, how Clara, manipulative even then, had exploited his childish jealousy of Martha's popularity. He admitted to the prank that escalated, his fear when he realized the true consequences, and Grandma's desperate intervention to protect him from scandal. He finally articulated the profound guilt that had shadowed his entire life, the secret that had warped his relationship with his mother and kept him from true peace. This was the twist. The realization that Victor, too, had been a victim of Clara's manipulation and his own youthful folly, trapped in the silence that followed. The K-letter 1ECBCH tin here was internal, a quiet, devastating unraveling of a man's lifelong burden. I never stopped thinking about her, about what I did. But Grandma, she told me to never speak of it. For the family, I thought it was the right thing to do. His voice was hoarse, thick with unshed tears. This wasn't absolution, but it was a crucial step towards understanding. His raw vulnerability was startling. It didn't erase the pain he caused, but it humanized his struggle, revealing the long-term psychological toll of shared silence. The atmosphere shifted from tension to a fragile introspection. He expressed a desperate need to find Martha, to offer a belated, heartfelt apology, to somehow make amends. It marked the beginning of his new path, a path of quiet strength and emerging purpose, seeking redemption, not just forgiveness. The encounter was exhausting, but it was a necessary cleansing, a painful unburdening that transitioned us towards the possibility of fractured but real healing for everyone involved. The slow path to reconciliation. The aftermath of Aunt Clara's confrontation and Uncle Victor's tearful confession left our family deeply scarred, yet strangely, irrevocably altered. The initial volatile chaos gave way to a somber, fragile quiet. It was clear that the bonds, once thought unbreakable, were now fundamentally changed. This wasn't a sudden, Hollywood style reconciliation. It was a long, arduous process, marked by tentative steps and a profound acknowledgement of the pain that had festered for decades. The mini hook was the almost unbearable awkwardness of our first post revelation family dinner. The air was thick with unspoken questions, with accusations hanging unspoken yet palpable. Yet, despite the deep wounds, a remarkable thing began to happen. The truth, however ugly, began to act as a strange kind of antiseptic. Max, ever the anchor, initiated family therapy sessions, a neutral ground where the bitter divisions could slowly, painfully be aired. Lily, with her pure heart, became a bridge, her innocent grief allowing others to express their own. We talked, we argued, we cried. Old grievances surfaced, not just about Clara and Victor, but about decades of minor slights and misunderstandings, all exacerbated by a culture of silence. This was the twist. The truth about Martha and Clara became a catalyst, forcing the entire family to confront not just one secret, but the pervasive pattern of unspoken issues that had always simmered beneath the surface. The K-letter 1ECBCH tin here was the slow, painful process of deconstruction, tearing down walls that had stood for generations. The path to reconciliation was not linear. Some relatives, unwilling or unable to face the harsh realities, chose to remain estranged. The wounds were too deep, the betrayals too personal. But for many, including Uncle Victor, who now actively participated in therapy, a tentative healing began. The process of finding Martha became a collective family mission, a shared act of atonement. We pooled resources, followed every lead, pouring our collective energy into righting a wrong that had haunted us for so long. There was a quiet dignity in this shared purpose, a sense that we were not just seeking an individual, but seeking our own collective redemption. This painful journey led to unexpected connections, to a deeper, more honest understanding of each other, stripped of pretense. We learned that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, but about acknowledging the pain, accepting the imperfections, and choosing to rebuild, one fragile brick at a time. The fragile hope, now tinged with ongoing grief for the lost years and the damage done, led us toward tentative steps forward, creating deepened connections forged in the crucible of shared truth. The journey was not about erasing the past, but about bravely facing it, accepting its scars, and slowly, painstakingly, moving towards a future built on honesty and true understanding. The resolution and reflection. Years passed, marked by quiet progress and the slow, arduous work of healing. The final chapters of this story unfolded not with a grand, dramatic flourish, but with the gentle, profound cadence of life lived honestly. The culmination of our long search for Martha Everett came unexpectedly, through a dusty genealogical forum. She was found, not in the small town the alumnus had mentioned, but a state away, living a quiet life. A fierce, resilient woman who had built her own world, far from the shadows of Camp Clearwater. The day we spoke, her voice cautious at first, then laced with a tentative curiosity, was a moment of profound, breathtaking relief. We offered our apologies, shared Grandma Elara's heartfelt confession, and slowly, gently, began to fill in the missing pieces of her past. It wasn't about erasing the harm, but acknowledging it, offering a belated hand of friendship and a space for her story to finally be heard. The palpable sense of relief and calm that washed over our family was immeasurable, a quiet justice finally served. Our journey had transformed us. Uncle Victor, deeply changed by his reckoning, dedicated his retirement to volunteering at a youth mentorship program, silently seeking to atone for his past mistakes, offering guidance he wished he'd had as a boy. Lily found her voice, becoming a passionate advocate for honesty and open communication within families, carrying Grandma Elara's lessons forward. For me, the meaning of inheritance had expanded far beyond possessions. It was the inheritance of truth, of resilience, of the complex, flawed, yet enduring power of family. It highlighted the deeper meaning of the inheritance, not just in what was given, but in what was learned, endured, and ultimately healed. This story, our story, became a profound thought, a lasting lesson. It taught us that silence, while sometimes born of love or protection, can be a heavy burden, a destructive force that poisons generations. But honesty, however painful, holds the power to liberate, to heal, and to forge stronger, more authentic bonds. The true legacy isn't in what's hidden, but in the courage to reveal, to acknowledge, and to mend. It's about recognizing that every family has its shadows, but it's in bringing those shadows into the light that we find our true strength. Thank you for listening to the Summer Camp Secret. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below, share your thoughts, and subscribe for more echoes from the past. Until next time, remember that the most profound lessons are often found in the quietest corners of our shared human experience. A farewell.